Hi, everybody. Welcome to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. I am Cynthia, the founder of screenlessplaymore.com, and we have such a treat today. I have Erin Loechner here, who is the author of Chasing Slow, and also of what we're going to discuss today, which is the Opt-Out Family, how to give your kids what technology can't. So, Erin, thank you so much and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, this is so wonderful. I was just telling Erin, I heard her on the 1,000 Hours Outside podcast, and I was probably halfway through the podcast and I had to press pause and go onto Amazon to buy her book because there was just like so many amazing things that they were talking about. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to. So by the end of this conversation, hopefully everybody is rushing out to their bookstore, to their Amazon and grabbing it because, oh man, it tells you what the algorithm is doing, how it's sucking us all in, and then just so many ideas about how we can resist it and basically use it, like use the algorithm in our own lives in like a very low tech way, but kind of use all of their tips and tricks to just make our families have more fun without tech. So it's not like you are Amish and you have no electricity. I mean, you were really in it, right? Like you were a blogger, you had 1.4 million followers, you would do conferences with Silicon Valley trailblazers, you had a renovation show on hgtv.com. So obviously you were in the thick of it. What was it that made you just say, it is time to opt out?
Yeah, I was a very online person for a very long time. Honestly, I think probably it was a slow unpeeling, but the biggest push was recognizing that I was having children that were going to come up through the ranks and face this issue even more so than what I had to. I'm 43, so gosh, I feel like the bulk of my adulthood was certainly spent with an internet career. But then when I had children, my oldest is 12 now, I realized, if I continue at this pace, I'm going to be parenting with my phone in my hand all the
Mm-hmm.
time. And I knew there was going to become a day when my daughter was going to say, well, when do I get a phone? When do I get social media? When can I be doing what you're doing, sort of? And I thought I don't have a good answer because honestly, the way that social media is set up now, I never want her to go there. I
Yeah.
never want it to be her playground. And certainly that will be her decision as she grows. But if I can model a different way and if I can sort of uh, almost proactively push back against some of these excuses that we make as grown adults that we certainly hear from children too. If I can kind of unpack those and see why are we using our phone so much, what it is about this phone that is so addicting, that is so engaging, that we are spending most of our lives on them.
Mm-hmm.
If I can figure that out, then maybe I can point her to a different way. And then my subsequent kids as well. So I have three now. But it was really interesting. I knew that our loose strategy, myself and my husband, who worked for Apple's ad agency, so we definitely know how the sausage is
Okay.
made. But we knew from the get-go, we don't want the only reason that they don't choose or that they choose a smartphone to be because they don't see anybody else choosing that option as well. We
Mm-hmm.
wanted them to be surrounded with a wide circle of people who were doing tech very differently. And so we just decided to go first. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, that means I carry around a dumb phone most of the time. And my husband does have a smartphone, but we have pretty strict boundaries around the whole thing. And our kids won't have smartphones that are given by us, when they have a job and they choose whatever phone. Obviously, that would be their decision. They'll buy it themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
we will provide a flip phone and we have a landline. So, open door
Okay.
policy, people can come and go. But yeah, it was a loose decision. And our motto became be more engaging than the algorithm because we knew we couldn't just say no to devices. We needed to say yes to something better.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's just where this book is so full of ideas of how to be more engaging. And like you say, you can't just say no phone and then just expect them to come up with something to do on their own. That sounds like a disaster. But there's a part right at the very beginning of the book that I think does speak a lot to where we stand as a society. and you described setting up a rope swing in the front of your house. And you just thought, oh, this is going to be great. All these kids walking home from school are going to be playing on the rope swing. And then there was one day, like, can you explain what you saw with this one little girl that came
Uh,
over to the swing?
yeah. Yeah, honestly, so and I'm looking at it right now. It's nervous. It's just swinging empty. It just we noticed. I had thought that it would be this like neighborhood flock. We live in the middle of a there's a little elementary school right in the middle of our neighborhood, and so kids, are walking by every day with their families, and I just started to notice this shift. People, always had their earbuds in. They were always listening to podcasts on their walk. They weren't engaging with each other. Um, Kids were, head down on phone. These are elementary kids, they had their weighted down with iPads, the whole thing. Certainly there were exceptions to the norm, but I don't know. I just thought, okay, well, let's do something fun and get to know our neighbors and put this thing out in the front rather than the back. And what happened was I got so excited and so giddy because I saw, and no one had used it. And I saw this little girl. Um, she was, gosh, I want to say, well, now I know her to be 11, but at the time she was not. I think she was 8.
Okay.
And she came up to the swing and she started to just like climb up slowly, slowly. And I thought, oh, she's gonna go, she can get to the top. It's this ladder rope swing, goes all the way to the highest branches. It's very fun. And I just got so giddy and so excited, like here's childhood reclaimed. And then she gets to the top and I see her pull out her phone and she just uses it to take selfies. She's just using it as a selfie tower and
Ugh.
not a rope swing. And I just thought, oh, something has changed
Yeah.
in a pretty dramatic way. And how do we, not that we need to go back to the way things were always, I'm not a purist, but I do believe in childhood innocence. I do believe in giving people space to grow up, and it didn't seem like that was happening in our society. So it very much saddened me, and it very much um made me write the book, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering if that was really sort of a pivotal moment for you in some way of just seeing, this wonderful, amazing swing is in front of you. And instead it's just something to sit on while you take selfies. And,
Yeah.
um, I think you mentioned in the book that we're really living in a different time, and you said we're using yesterday's solutions to solve tomorrow's problems because I am 46 and we just had TV, and that was a solution if you decided, okay, you guys get X amount of TV a day and okay, time to go play. But you were saying the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry gives these really vague recommendations that are mostly like X amount of hours for this age. And I mean, it's not the same as it used to be. You can't just say do an hour, do 2 hours, because it all depends on what kind of screen time you're having, whether it's television or it's TikTok or it's Facebook. And I just thought this was so startling. You say, under these vague guidelines, my toddler can binge watch Pinky Malinky while her 10-year-old sister attempts TikTok's Benadryl challenge, which encourages participants to overdose on Benadryl for the hallucinogenic high. And her brother can, just like an 8-year-old boy in Ohio did, take the minivan to McDonald's for a burger after learning how to drive on YouTube. And it's like, well, yeah, if we're not paying any attention, it's unbelievable what kids can see online. It's not just, oh, you're watching Paw Patrol. And so, I mean,
And I will also say, even if we are paying attention, to be honest, part of the research, I mean, after this book was published, I went around to just all kinds of schools and social clubs and churches and organizations talking about this. And I cannot tell you how many teens came up and said, I was introduced to porn when my mom was in the other room cutting vegetables,
wow.
it just comes, it shows up. I mean, we have absolutely no control over what our kids are seeing online, and I would never want to be their content moderator and lord their tech use over. I think that's just a barrier in terms of the parent-child relationship. And so for me, it was just, why are we tiptoeing with this? What if we just don't mess with it at all and we just grow together and we just share we share screens, we share our usage, we share what happens on the screen, and everything's in an open space, but there's no personal devices. There's no private accounts. It just, we use our desktop computer if we need to get a recipe, and then we go back and do what we're doing, So
Yeah.
it really was eye-opening how when you look to the screen time standards, and of course we know now I know because the research why those guidelines are so vague. Well, they're funded by big tech, so of
Oh,
course they're big. Of course they're not going to recommend to not have these devices in your home. I mean, Apple's the one that gave them all iPads in every backpack. So
yeah.
I just and and if anybody is listening to any of this conversation and they're like, oh, I just feel really guilty or convicted or what, just I mean, don't be guilty for your be angry
Right.
at
I know. Like we didn't know. Everything seemed fantastic at first, you know. It's amazing to have this map that talks to you in your purse. And it all seems so wonderful, but it slowly changed. And I think you give a great example of how Instagram changed. It was just a place where like, oh, you put up your pictures. And I mean, I absolutely logged on because it was like, oh, good, I can see my niece, I can see my goddaughter. No worries. And then in 2017, they changed their algorithm. And if you don't mind kind of explaining what they did, because apparently when they changed it, they went from $1.8 billion to $47.6 billion.
yeah. So I mean, I was an early beta tester of social media, so I was in it from the get-go. And for Instagram, for people that remember what it used to be like, it was chronological. You would decide who you wanted to be friends with. There wasn't a big discovery page, where there were suggested users all over the place. There wasn't a feed or a for you. It was just you go on and you ask your friends, what's your handle?
Uh-huh.
In real life, and you type in their handle, and then you follow them, and you follow people that you mostly knew in real life, and then you got this chronological, almost like a little yearbook. Whenever they posted, you would get a new. But what happened was Instagram decided, well, this is obviously going to be a lucrative project, right? It started to gain steam, and they decided to start suggesting users. And the big update was changing from a chronological feed to an algorithm feed. So it suggested, here are all of the moments that you missed. And there
Okay.
was an auto refresh happening and an endless scroll happening. And the idea, I remember, sitting in the room when the person responsible for this algorithm change was speaking about it, and he said, "We don't really know what's going to happen with this, right?" I mean, he was kind of admitting that this is probably not going to be great for the user, but it's going to be great for the company, because what happened was it became a bit more addictive. It became a lot less safe. Um, and Instagram kind of became a gatekeeper in a way. You weren't just seeing, and now we know we don't see anything from our friends. People talk about getting shadow banned and all kinds of things. I'm not on there anymore, so I don't know. But um, they talked about, we want to give you the moments that we think you will love the most. So it was as if the user was no longer in charge at all. We're not choosing who we want to follow. We're
So
just
it could be
letting.
a complete stranger. You're seeing pictures of somebody you've never met ever, but they think
Yeah.
like, oh, because you liked such and such, we're going to show you this.
Right. Yeah, yeah, of course. And then, when you have geocaching and everything, like with location, it's oh, you were at the airport with this person who was wearing these pants. Now we can serve you the ad for these pants. You guys were both
Wow.
in the same location. I'm sure you saw it in real life. You probably liked him because you like this, this, and this. That person also liked this and this. So now, great, we can sell you the pants. So it didn't become about the people anymore at all.
Wow. So they can tell that you're standing at the airport next to somebody that you don't even know. Is that what
Oh,
you're saying?
yes.
And so they know because both of you are standing there and you have your geolocation and you both are on Instagram. So that's why we think, oh my gosh, this is magic. I was just thinking about such and such, and then it came up in my feed.
A
It,
million percent. Now you can turn off those settings. I mean, I believe you can now, but with every update, they change the terms and conditions. They don't have to let you know. So it's all it's pretty nefarious when you kind of peek under the curtain a bit.
and it's tough for adults. I mean,
Mm.
we get sucked in too, but I just can't even imagine what it's like for a kid who's 12 years old, 10 years old, that doesn't understand that they're getting fed this information, that doesn't understand that there's a lot of mathematics behind it. And, we can choose, like, this is creeping me out. I'm going to turn it off. But it's just so much harder for kids.
It is, and it was designed to be that way.
And like, I mean, I'm harping on kind of the scary stuff for the moment before we get to all the solutions, but this stuff just really blew my mind and was so eye-opening to me. Aside from Instagram, TikTok, and you said while you're watching TikTok, it's watching you. And I just have to read this part that just absolutely floored me. Um, it says, imagine you're a teenage girl watching a typical TikTok dance challenge, but through biometrics, the app registers that your eyes are distracted by the flat belly of one of the dancers, her toned thighs. In the next video, you're zeroing in on someone's triceps and your heart beats faster. The next video, an influencer in an undisclosed ad for a 3-day detox cleanse and workout ebook to guarantee you'll look amazing for your next TikTok, just $199. Click add to cart. So you just don't even realize how much you're being manipulated. So they're actually like watching your eyeballs and where you're looking.
Oh, yeah, the technology is there. So everybody that I interviewed who was working within, the TikTok realm said you have got to look into biometrics. It's going to be, I mean, their prediction is it's going to be built into every platform. I mean, the technology is all there, right? Google Glasses. You can just really, it's wild how far it's all come, but yeah, the capacity is there, and the terms and conditions are so vague that you don't really know you don't know how much they're using it. You don't know how they're using it and why. And you also don't know where that information is being stored and who it's being sold to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, essentially we're signing over. It's to me the biggest, not the biggest, one of the really big issues with this is with both prevalence and the capacity for deepfakes, how easy it is to make them anymore. That, once that data is available to any hacker, which I think that we kind of kid ourselves when we think that this information is under lock and key. Everything is hackable. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. Every data expert I talked to said it's not if you're going to be hacked, it's when you're going to be hacked. And that is also true for these big companies. And so, we're signing over our data to these companies who can essentially, when we're talking about over time, the long game, our facial recognition software, our face is going to be our ID. It's we're not going to be carrying around driver's licenses anymore. We have our face and we have our likeness.
Mm-hmm.
And when that can be stolen so easily because of everything that we are sharing online and posting, I think a lot about the senior citizen community. I think a lot about under-resourced communities who are sort of pushed into this world without maybe being made aware of some of the more nefarious consequences from using them. So, and then certainly kids. I really scream in anger for those communities who are being sold
Mm-hmm.
and really offered a promise that is not being delivered upon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are your personal parameters that you guys use? So you have like a flip phone and or a dumb phone and what do you guys do at your house? Do you have TV, no TV? Do you have just desktops? How does it all work for you guys?
Yeah, the kids and we all have access to a desktop. Their desktop computer is, well, depending on, there's sort of a kid login and a parent login. So if I have to print something for a kid that I have to access on the internet, then I'm going to go in through the parent login. But then we have a child login as well, and pretty much that's just for access to SketchUp for construction software because we homeschool, and so we do a lot of projects like that. And then Microsoft Word, for which again is not lock safe by any means. We use TextEdit a lot, and they can practice typing or whatever if they want to once they get older. Um, so that shared desktop is kind of in a main space. We don't have personal devices. Kids don't have iPads. We have like a family iPad that's on piano. I talk about this in the book. The idea of sort of single tasking with if you do have a device that you don't want to be kind of this multitasking thing that your kid owns and has kind of ownership or responsibility over, then a really good question to ask yourself is, okay, how is tech like going to support our family's goals? So one of our kids' goals was learning to play the piano. We had an in-person piano teacher for a while, but we live off grid part of the time in the summer. And so out west, so we live in two locations. So for the summer, we thought, well, what if we try something different? What if there is an app available? We didn't love the options, so we decided to hold off, but we did eventually get a software that runs on an iPad, and this is the only thing that it can run. And so it's sort of just connected and plugged into the piano, and it just stays there at all times. So when our kids practicing piano, they can they can do their scales through that, which is funny because my 4-year-old will see kids with an iPad at a restaurant and think everybody's practicing scales. She just assumes everybody brought their pianos with them. She just doesn't know it to have anything different. So
Right.
um, those are kind of, so we do a lot of if there are family dinners or if there are people over, we always encourage everybody to just leave their, I mean, people know by now we're just the weirdos about the whole thing. We've never been under the radar about it. So we're the neighborhood hangout zone. We're a low tech zone. We always tell the parents, like, you could call a landline if you need your kid at any time, but have them leave their phones at home. The kids love it because they know they're not going to be interrupted. They're not going to be asked or filmed without their consent. They're
Hmm.
not going to have to perform a TikTok dance in the living room. They're not. They love that they can carry on in the play and the manner of play that they want. We have teens come over that say, "Oh my gosh, like, just feels different here." We love that we don't have to be on.
Hmm.
We're not going to be tracked. There's just a lot of. I think we talk so much as a society about um, kind of the things that a kid will lose, right, in terms of social circle or freedom or independence. But that freedom is all gained back. They can be a person and they can move through the world without any of some of those chains that technology can sometimes bring with it. So
Right.
those are just it, a couple. We're not shy about asking if sometimes we'll say, because we're modeling this for our kids, right? If somebody comes over and they want to show us their vacation photos, we'll sometimes just say, um, actually, could you just explain it? We want to hear, like, we want to, like, we want to see and hear the passion in your face. Like, we want to hear it from your eyes. I mean, I
Hmm.
can see a million photos of Cabo, but it's fun to hear it about,
Right.
like, from that, what you experienced. So,
That's fun because then you get the anecdotes, you get like the actual stories of what they did. It's not
yeah.
just a
And then they're
travel
not,
log.
right. They're not just watching you watch their photos or their videos. And then it's not a barrier for the kids because the kids would be like, "Oh, well, can we see?" And that's just not really anything that we do in our family anyway. So it brings everybody on the same page a little more. So we do little thing. I mean, it's a lot of a lifestyle and just tiny, tiny, tiny choices that add up to none of this really mattering
Hmm.
much at all. We do not have screen time guidelines. We don't I mean, there, because it's not on. It's just
Hmm.
not there to kind of lure them. It's not. I find that a lot of people I talk to, a lot of parents will say, um, it's almost harder to moderate than it is to just cut out
Yeah.
because there's constant battles. If can I have it yet? Can I have it yet? If you use it as a reward, then it's like, did I earn it? And what's to be earned? Then you're kind of elevating the
Right.
experience. It shouldn't be elevated. It's a lesser quality interaction than what real life is. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I agree a million
we
percent. It's so hard with the battles, but if you just set a hard and fast rule, that's what I found. We do something that we call Screen Free Sunday, and they just know, don't even ask because mom is going to say no. And I love it. It's my favorite day of the week. We just do board games and we go places and we read books and it's I just love it because they aren't saying, "Can I? Can I? Can I? Can I?"
right, exactly. Yeah.
Um, I noticed a lot throughout the book that you really reference a lot of great literature. What is the role that reading and literature plays in you guys' home?
Well, again, we homeschool, so it's my responsibility to just, I mean, that's my number one. We go to the library 3, 4 times a week.
Cool.
There all the time. Um, I have a whole wall of outward facing books that the kids can choose from every day. So, independent reading, free reading is both assigned. I'll assign certain, fiction or nonfiction novels that I think our kids would really relate to independently based on where they are in their life. I kind of consider myself, I'm less of a teacher and more of just a facilitator, right? I'm just providing the materials for them to kind of enjoy on their own. So I would say reading is absolutely the bulk of it. And, it sort of plants itself into the brain the same way that um, screens could, if used right. If you're watching a really great documentary or, you're engaging with something that feels very educationally nuanced or something, you can find that in a living book. You can find
Mhm.
that kind of that same concept. So um, it plays a massive role. And we really do try to focus a lot of our literature on stories of people that went against the grain, stories of people who didn't mind living a little differently than everybody else, because that's a big family pillar. I mean, this is a big part of our family culture. And so, not that that means they can't take away what they want to. And as they age, it will shift. We're not going to be tech lords for sure. But yeah, it's important that we not just talk about all of the harms and
Mhm,
dangers,
mhm.
but we just talk about the benefits of looking and feeling and living differently.
Well, it's just so fun that then, Jonathan Haidt talks about how phones and social media and all that are experience blockers. And if you're not on TikTok or social media, you have time to read a book. You have time to play in the backyard. You just get all this time back that you didn't have before because you're playing video games. And um, one of the things in terms of, getting back other things to do, you just have so many fun ideas in here of things that kids can do. Um, One of the things that the algorithm does that really sucks us in is getting rid of starting and stopping cues. So people will notice that when they turn on TikTok, the video is already playing. It's like, hey, the party's already going on, and you just get sucked immediately in. And so you have these wonderful ideas about just like have everything ready to go. Like, don't have any starting cues. And that is absolutely the number one thing that I took away from your book that has been so helpful because I've noticed if I have two boys, they are 9 and 7, and if I say, "Does anybody want to play a board game?" Sometimes like, meh, no thanks. But if the board game is out on the table and I have opened it up and they come downstairs from being asleep, holy cow, all of a sudden they instantly just are so excited and they want to play board games. Or I kind of accidentally realized that just by having a messy house, and we too go to the library a lot, I just had books kind of all over the place. And like, I would just look around and all of a sudden my 7-year-old's just sitting on the floor reading a book because it just happened to be sitting there because my living room was a total mess and there were just books everywhere. And so I love that one that it's like, let's just have something set out or um like could you talk about like that concept of strewing?
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that. That was a really big eye opener for me as a mother too, specifically of the younger ones. We kind of grew into it, but you're right, it works for board games too. Um, but the idea is, TikTok is so good at finding out what delights your kid, and finding out what they want more of and what they want to see more of and engage more with. And so we can do that so much better as parents, if like what you said, library books thrown about. I remember when my toddler when they were still napping, when they're younger, I would sometimes I would always had a coffee table that was littered with things by the afternoon, but I would always during their nap clear off that one coffee table and then just set out a couple objects for whatever that for that child to discover when they wake up. And inevitably, it was like Christmas morning, it's just a spatula
Mhm.
or some pine cones. It was never anything new or fun or jazzy, but just something interesting to discover out of the context and when they would normally see it. TikTok works so well because it's surprising. It's not
Mhm.
thing over and over and over. It adds just a little bit of novelty in the day. And so we can do that as parents. And we do it already. I think of the times when, you've got you're baking cookies in the oven and all of a sudden every child comes out from wherever they once were,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, "Who's coming over? What are we doing? What's going on?" It's just it's the idea that you're not saying, "Does anybody feel like cookies right now?"
Right.
That just truly doesn't work anyway. If you display it, you don't say it. I think, imagine if you were starving and somebody's like, well, why don't you make a pot roast? Or if you just have the pot roast right there in front of it. Well, now they're
Right.
going to eat it. They're going to be excited. So I think sometimes we make it more complicated than it needs to be. But I also don't think it's an accident that so much of these Silicon Valley programmers are childhood expert psychologists. A lot of them really do know how the brain works and how the prefrontal cortex is growing and
Interesting.
when sort of these different parts of your brain are lighting up and over what. That's not an accident. It's all very much connected, and they're all things that we as parents can do even better.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're so right. And then I love you're saying, don't get rid of, don't have to have these starting cues, but also the stopping cues of like just give kids the freedom to play. You mentioned Maria Brusoni, who says if something's happening with your kid and you feel like you need to step in, just give yourself 17 seconds. Like if it's like, oh, it looks like he's going to fall out of that tree, but I'm not sure. It's like, just step back, see if he figures it out. Or you made a great example of like if your daughter is like working on knitting or something and you can tell she's getting really frustrated. It's like, don't just jump in because that kind of stops the flow. Like maybe she's going to figure it out if you just give her the space
Yeah.
and like I love you said your kid might be outside playing and you think, oh, they look cold. I'm going to go give them their coat. But it's like, well, if they wanted their coat, they would come in and get their coat. And if you go out there, that interrupts their flow of play. And that's a stopping cue. And
Yeah.
so, if you just let it go, it's amazing how resilient kids are and how they can just play and play and play for so long if we don't interrupt them.
They can, and they're learning independence and regulation and all of and it's so hard because we mean so well, like we're
Yeah.
thinking we're actually being very helpful and present and available and accessible. And sometimes you just gotta sit on your hands and just kind of like snap your mouth shut. I mean, I have held my mouth shut, but um, because it's very hard. It takes a lot of practice, and no one is excellent at it. But I think the more we practice, the better we get in recognizing. The goal here is for them to decide their comfort level in their own experience. We want them to be able to move through the world, recognizing for themselves, am I cold? Is something off? They need to be their own eyes and ears, and we
Mm,
can't do that for them. So
mhm.
if we practice now, it will only get easier as they age.
Yeah. Um, some of these other really fun ideas you have, um, the Da Vinci Notebook. That sounds really cool. Could you explain that?
Oh, that's one of my favorite things. Some people call it a commonplace notebook, but it is just, we were reading about Leonardo da Vinci, and he just had pages and pages and pages of just the most, and no one ever could make sense of it except for him, I'm sure. But just illustrations and designs and ideas of all, the flying machine and all of these things that he was dreaming in his mind. And so, when my kids were very young, I gave them each one, and we called it their Da Vinci notebook. And it was just here, this is a place where you can put every idea that you have in your head. And of course, each child interacts with it so differently. One is more artsy, and so he likes to draw illustrations and patterns and things like that. One is far more verbal, and so she uses it almost as a journal, more relational ideas rather than inventions. But however, it doesn't matter. There are no rules. But finding a place for your child's creativity to go, a container for that, so that they can call it their own, I think is really important. I know a lot of families use a Lincoln hat, which I think Jenny and I probably already talked about,
Mhm.
but because Lincoln was the same. He had a place for his ideas. He would tuck them in his hat when he would take long, long walks in the morning all by himself. And then he would dump the hat and his secretary would have to make sense of all of them. And so Same idea. Just, honoring your child's brain and their mind and their ability to create and conjure is a really great, um, I think, offset for the idea that screen time makes us into consumers more often than not. I
Hmm.
think we hear of some of the creative videos that we can watch and we think, oh, see, that's our child being creative. And sometimes it's a stepping stone to creativity, certainly, but there are many, many others that we won't have to detox from when they're older.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
finding some ways to put those in place. And there are so many in the book that we've relied on, that other families I interviewed have relied on, that are really, really valuable to implement.
Well, and also it's fun, you talk a lot about making sure your kid knows how to regulate themselves, how to know if they're hot or cold, how to know if they're, just all these things. And we're relying so much on, oh, I have a question. Let me just look it up instantly. And, you know, teaching our kids that there's other ways to find out information. You don't have to just trust Google. And like that Lincoln had's like, okay, I have a question. I'll put it in the hat. And at the end of the week, we'll talk about it. I don't have to get the answer right this second. And also, this great example where I think it was your daughter that like found a creature out in the creek and she was like, "What is this?" And you absolutely could have been like, "Let's look it up on Google." And instead, you like asked a neighbor or something who was really knowledgeable. What was
Yeah,
that?
we did. And it turns out, yeah, it was a muskrat. But she was 4. So for her 4-year-old mind, she was describing it in such a prehistoric manner. But we called a neighbor that we knew had grown up on that pond, knew it like the back of his hand, and was a science teacher. So honestly, it was the most beautiful lesson for me because certainly there was the temptation. My mother-in-law even said, well, we could just pull it up on Google Photos or whatever and see if we can find something similar because we want to solve our kids' problems. We want to answer their questions. But so do they. They want to answer them too. And they
Hmm.
want to have access to figure that out. And so the more that I think we can point to people instead of machines, the more passionate that learning experience is. My daughter still loves muskrats, and I do not think that's an accident. I think
Yeah.
it was the idea of us running home and calling neighbor Dave and then running back. And of course, it wasn't just, oh yeah, that's a muskrat. It was, oh my gosh, you guys, yes, that was a muskrat. And I think what you saw was the nest that the mom was building for the babies, which is right in my yard. Do you want to come see it? And he just gave us this whole tour of this muskrat habitat that we just would not have had otherwise.
Right.
And
That's just so
it's
fun. Such a whole experience.
beautiful.
And she got the joy of discovery and figuring it out herself and learning about community and engaging your neighbors and realizing like Google is not the only place that has information. We all have information. Everybody in our community is an expert on something. You just
Yes.
need to reach out and try to find out who they are and what they know. And I love that. Um,
Yeah.
uh, kind of jumping around a little bit, but you said that you homeschool. Have you done that the entire time, or was there a time when your kids did go to public school?
Entire time, yeah. We used
Okay.
to travel a lot when they were young, and so we just sort of would be on the road. And but now, yeah, it looks a little bit more. We're pretty roots down in our community. They're in a theater group and things like that. But yeah, just the whole way through, we've done it pretty.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because you mentioned some of the like ed tech in here, and I'm really struggling with that right now because my sons, they go to a charter school that's public, but I feel like there's a lot of screen time throughout the day. And I was interested to see you specifically talked about Prodigy because my kids play that at school and it's a math game. And I just thought it was so interesting that you quoted actually somebody at the University of Colorado, which is just down the street from us, saying that there's studies that they do not actually learn math from Prodigy. And I had actually just heard something the other day from Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Anxious Generation, that it's problematic because they just get these hits of dopamine and they're just, the teachers think, oh great, they're learning math. And really, they're just like learning to crave more and more dopamine because they're playing a game and everything is gamified. And then when you aren't playing the game, oh, this worksheet is really boring. Like it's not Prodigy, it's not super fun. And I love that on your website, you have some templates that people could go to of letters that you can write to your administrators saying, I would like to opt out of having my child do screen time at school, or I think one says like they could opt out of like bringing home their iPad at the end of the day. And I just kind of wondered your thoughts on if we're in the situation where we do have a lot of screen time going on at school, how do you think we can kind of mitigate that or balance that with the rest of our lives?
Yeah, I think that is the absolute number one hardest thing for parents is the amount of technology that has been embraced and praised in schools. I see that ship turning around thanks to Jonathan Haidt for sure, and I'm grateful. I would send you to Tech Safe Coalition. I think it's Tech Safe Learning Coalition, TLC, but Nikki Reisberg started it, and it's I've been involved as well as just kind of combining all of the research that I did for the book, interviewing other families. How are you managing it? But this website, and I can send you the link so you can put it in your show notes, but this website has everything. It has everything that you would need to know what are some sort of red flag apps to look for that my child might be using during the school day. How do I talk to the administration? How can I opt out? What can I expect after I opt out? It is so helpful, and I think there are so many parents that are rallying around that. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor. Our kids are in school 8 hours a day, so to see them kind of entrenched in the idea, to me it's not even the screen time, it's the idea that tech solves our problems.
Yeah.
I don't love that mindset. I don't think it's true. And so watching, having them kind of have to detox from that mindset, when they're in your own home, and now you're the bad guy, now you're saying, well, no, because who would argue with learning, who would argue with
Mm-hmm.
education? And that's where so many parents are, is we have to be kind of the regulator when our children, and it's not the administrator's fault. It's they were sold something too.
Right.
We were all sold something, and it comes from uh, a real place, and that is Silicon Valley. And so I think that the less that we can, the more that we can kind of band together to solve the problem, which is not whose fault is this, but what do we do now, the
Mm-hmm.
better. So, yeah, Tech Safe Learning Coalition. You can download the scripts on my site, but I think they're probably over there too. And that will have a more robust advice for parents dealing with that tech in any way. But certainly start banging the drum now, no matter what your kid's age is. It is turning around. You're not on an island anymore. I think more and more parents are sort of waking up to the idea that this is not what we thought it was,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's not education anymore. And so I
Yeah.
think just being bold in that awakening has been really great.
And I think what started to happen too that I noticed, I was mentioning something to the principal about perhaps becoming a phone-free school. And he said, oh, great. I love that idea, but it's actually the parents that want the kids to have phones because they want to be able to get in touch with them. So I think if people are out there and they want this to change, they just have to have their voices be heard so that the administrators know, yes, there's a lot of parents that want their kids to have phones. There's also a lot of parents that want there to be no phones at school. And we don't want them to continue to think that just all the parents want this and sorry, we can't do anything about it. So I think the more that
You
we
know
just,
what? I had a parent, this was a fascinating solution. So it was the same conversation, and then the principal said, well, honestly, like this is the parents. The parents want to be able to reach their kids at all times, which is on us. We have got to learn how to trust our kids, and that can only happen with practice. We just have to practice trusting them. It is the hardest thing ever. It's just a nuts
Mhm.
world. But she said, okay, well, what about this? What if I give every parent in this school, this is wild, I know. Will give every parent in this school my phone number, and I will literally sit outside in the school parking lot, and you can call me at any time. And honestly, he was like, well, I mean, I think it just kind of raised the eyebrows of the principal, like, oh, that is what we're doing. Like I mean, that used to be the school secretary. That was just their job. But
Right.
now the school secretary is managing, every platform and app there is. And so they don't necessarily have time for it. So this parent raised their
She
hand.
was
I
saying
think,
she would take a message from mom number
yeah,
one and go inside and
absolutely.
say, kid number one, this is what your mom wants you to know.
Give it to the secretary. I know. And I think something in him realized, oh gosh, that's crazy. That would be
Yeah.
crazy. And so it just, I don't know, it pushed something in him to recognize, what are we doing
Mhm.
anymore? Like why are we not allowing our kids to be, if you know, if our there are many, many, many issues to this. I mean, I think there's the school safety issue, which I talk a lot about in my book, with the idea that, the safest place for your kid, if there is an event of a disaster, is to not have their phone on them and to be present and listening to the rules. And it's sort of the protocol around that.
Yeah,
So
getting
I think
directions from first responders and stuff and not, yeah,
that's
not being totally
it.
distracted.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think I don't fault any parent for thinking that, but if you are sending your child anywhere, summer camp, a friend's house, a school, there is some part of you that trusts that location. So you have to just let yourself trust
Right.
that location, and then prepare your child to be able to speak up. And then in the event that something happens, show them the adults in which can be trusted, that
Mhm.
then you may reach out and do something. If something is unsafe, they need to know how to respond to that without being able to call you. I don't believe in the idea that it's good for the parent to have the stress of being omniscient or
Yeah.
omnipotent or reachable and available at all times. It really does take a village, so we have to point to the other members of that village, and we have to trust them.
And I think we all just need to take a deep breath and realize we lived like this for so long. We said, Mom, I'm going to the mall and I will meet you at the food court at 3 o'clock. And we didn't die and we didn't get kidnapped. Sometimes we got there at 3:10 and our mom was really mad because we lost track of time. But then you learn the next time. And so, I love this piece also, and you talk about this at the end of the book, and I love what they're doing with Let Grow, and you mentioned that also, of just giving our kids more freedom, giving them a longer leash, giving them more responsibility. And so I've actually been asking this of other people that I've talked to. What is maybe not the first memory or one of the first memories you can remember just being totally free of parents? And like, what did you get the opportunity to do of just like, wow, okay, my parents let me go to X place or do whatever? And do you remember how it made you feel and how old were you?
I do. And honestly, it was the most beautiful thing. So, the rule when I was a kid, I lived in a little neighborhood in southern Indiana, and you had to ride your bike mailbox to mailbox. That was the rule.
Okay.
Mailbox, you could only go to this neighbor and back and forth and back and forth. Of course, it's like you have new wheels. That's perfect. That's all I need to do. I remember the moment I was allowed to go past my neighbor's mailbox. And gosh, I was probably sixth, seventh grade, I old. And I remember, I just kind of wove through in and out. And my parents had I knew enough neighbors. They had sort of pointed out to the safe house families, if you get in a pinch, if you have a flat tire, whatever, here's what to do, which I love. I love that idea of preparing your kid for the world.
Hmm.
Um, but I remember there was a massive rainstorm on the way I was trying to get back. And I just pulled my bike over and I huddled under pine trees, which now I know is the least safe place to be ever. But for whatever reason, I thought it was wise. And I waited it out. And then I came home and my parents, honestly, I don't even think they knew it was raining. They were just inside doing their own thing. And so it was like I had this entire experience outside of my parents and outside of my sisters and my whole family. And it was just mine. And that feeling is what our kids are after on their phone, on their personal accounts. They
Good
want
point.
theirs, that is only theirs, that is just 100% their own experience. And we could give them that with a bike ride for free. And we have to. We really do have to. So yeah, it was life-changing for
I
me. Just
love that you realize that. I think that's so wonderful that it's like you want something that's your own.
yeah.
And no wonder they're just like clinging to these things because they seem so personal, even though they're not. And yet, if you get to do a fun experience like that, not only is it your own, but you learn and you get braver. And oh, that's such a great story. I love that. Well, thank you so incredibly much for talking. Time flies. There's so many fabulous ideas in this book. I highly recommend it to everybody. It's called The Opt-Out Family by Erin Loechner. Is there anywhere else that they can learn more, like your website, or how should they try to get in touch?
Yeah. We're, of course, not on social media, but I do have it's optoutfamily.com. And it's just there for any resource that's in the book that people want to know more. It has many, many, partners of people that are doing really great work in the world. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Screen Less, Play More, the podcast. A special thanks to Neil Penninger, who composed our theme music. Please join us at screenlessplaymore.com for ideas on how to get your kids outside, away from screens, and enjoying independent play. We also have book reviews, screen-free toy and gift ideas, and so much more.